Hi, it's Musolini, the Merchant of Success. Welcome to this particular segment on how to get rid of scattered focus and achieve more 2.0. And this notion of scattered focus is even more relevant today, and each passing year or each passing week, it becomes more and more valuable. There's someone who wrote a book, either it was a book or a paper called The Attention Economy, saying that the most scarce resource, that the most valuable resource is attention. Can you get people's attention? And in this case, can we get your attention to focus on something? That's the big question, because there are so many distractions. Of course, we will look at the clarity, meaning the what and the why. We look at the mindset, the strategies needed, and then the skill sets you need to make sure that you move forward. And of course, the mastery. How do you put all this together to own it? Let's kick off with the clarity segment. So when we mention focus, we mean directed attention. And just again, to manage your expectations, there are a few concepts, and I again have to insist there are a few concepts that are a little overlapping with the program on time management and productivity, because the concept of focus really helps you manage time better and become more productive. So there will be a few concepts or ideas that will be a little overlapping, but I left them in there because you know that repetition is the mother of skill anyway. So, and hearing things from different perspectives, of course, I want to be using the exact words are useful for you. So focus is directed attention. Focus is about concentrated attention, and also undistracted devotion, meaning you're devoted to something. You hear of these priests or monks who go somewhere and then they spend all this time. That is undistracted devotion, as an example. Then also focus means you give something 100%. Ideally, that's the ideal number. Of course, sometimes it could be less, but that's the ideal number, 100%. So why focus? Or why is focus important? Number one, staying focused on a single task at a time puts less stress on your mind. The more pieces of things you have to pay attention to, the more stress. So the less things you have to pay attention to, the less stress on your mind, which means you have more resources available to you to execute other things. You're also able to accomplish the task much faster when you focus, unlike when you keep getting distracted. So one of the things I'm really pushing for is to figure out how to support my daughter to stay focused, because why she could be starting something and then before you know it, she's started something else. And then you're like, but you're supposed to finish this. It's like, oh, sorry. Then she runs back. And in the end, a task which would have ideally taken, let's say, 30 minutes ends up taking 2 hours or sometimes even more. And that happens to us also as adults. It's not just children. So when you focus on one thing, you finish tasks much faster. There's less exhaustion, of course, because of that level of concentration, and rather than having your energies spread all over the place, and you can achieve success much quicker or much faster. Okay. And I remember under the productivity program, I gave you an example of my friend. So here are some important statistics to engage your mind, to awaken your desire to be more focused. That 44% of those work distractions are self-inflicted, and another 23% come from emails. So meaning, as we are going through this, you need to start asking yourself, what are some of those work distractions which are self-inflicted? And how much comes from email? It's, okay, email, if you are employed, or somehow we have to live with email, so to speak. I'll show you how to handle that. But there are those self-inflicted distractions. How are you handling those? Also that the average desk job employee loses 2.1 hours a day to distractions and interruptions. That's a lot of time, because if on average we are supposed to work for 8 hours, that's over 25% of actual time taken away. Therefore, this is a skill not just for you and I, but a skill worth passing on to your colleagues, onto your team, because then this will either boost productivity or lower productivity at the workplace, depending on how we handle these distractions. Also, according to research, that being distracted by incoming calls or emails can lower employees' IQ by as much as 10 points. So distractions do not boost IQ, they actually lower IQ. Because remember, then the brain is in better state, okay? Is that better? Okay, yeah, it should be better. So you're just all over the place, so to speak. The brain is performing at a, is the red. So the slower the brain waves, the more focused you are. And the faster the brain waves, the more distracted you are. And of course, the concentration is a little lower there. I suppose, or I imagine, that's how it impacts the IQ levels. Trying to focus on more than one thing at a time reduces your productivity by as much as 40%. So which kind of correlates with this other statistic that 44% of those work distractions are self-inflicted. So therefore, we need to ask ourselves, what are those things we need to do to make sure that we focus on one thing at a time? Again, I love the Turkish saying that he who chases two rabbits catches none. And of course, with tasks, you may end up accomplishing both. But the question is, are you productive? And according to research, your productivity actually lowers when you're doing many things at a time. All right, now let's look at the mindsets required. The mindsets that enable focus. The first mindset is the freedom to check email, phone, and social media during breaks. There are people who feel like they should check their email, their phone, their social media every now and again. Every beep they check, every turn they check. I typically keep my phone in silence. Then if there are missed calls, I respond to them at my own pace. So if you feel that every minute you have to be checking, then that's going to be a big challenge. The second mindset is to remember that your brain is a muscle that can be trained to focus. So focus is a skill, it's a practice. It is something that you can put your mind to and get done and get things done. And I believe it also depends on it also requires a certain level of motivation. Say this, I'm going to focus and get it done. I notice, for example, my wife can concentrate for several hours non-stop. Okay, it's incredible what she's able to do. And I believe she's built her brain to perform that way. Personally, after 2 hours max, have to move, have to get a break. The other key thing to remember is that focus is a choice. So meaning you can choose to focus, you can choose to unfocus, if that word exists. You can choose not to focus. So you have the power to choose between the two. And I'm here to propose to you that given the two options, focus is always much, much more helpful. The other mindset to remember is that technology is a life accessory that I control. It doesn't control me. So that's what you should tell yourself. Because there are people who feel like technology is in charge of them rather than them being in charge of technology. So what's your perspective? What's your mindset around technology? Just because you have email and phones and all this, that doesn't mean that when the phone says jump, you say jump how much higher? No, it's you who should be in charge. It's you who should be in control. And that's something you should tell yourself. The other mindset is to remind yourself that focus is in your control. It's not in someone's control. It's not a pill you have to go to the pharmacy to buy. So it's something that is accessible. Let me put it, accessible is even a better word. So focus is accessible to you. And I'm encouraging you to think about not think, but to commit to say, okay, how can I be more focused? And just remind yourself that it's definitely 100% in your control. So, and what that means is you cannot use an excuse for not being focused. It's something that you can control. All right, let's now look at strategies of focus. Here are some 6 strategies for achieving maximum focus. The first strategy is self-control. And that means the desire to focus, taking charge of your environment, managing technology. So meaning you're controlling yourself. That's what this is what it's all about. You paying attention to the environment around you. You're deciding that technology is not going to be your master, but your servant. And once you do that, then you're tapping into the power of self-control, because sometimes it's challenging to control ourselves. I would tell you, when I was 2006, between 2006 and 2007, I will never forget that. I would jump from one website to another with news related to Arsenal. I mean, I lacked self-control around Arsenal news. So I would look at a story and I want to look at all the different angles. Now, I would visit like 10 websites or more. Okay, there was even a website that would curate news from across the world about us, and I would go through it non-stop. So now I just use 2 websites. So there's much more self-control now. Energy management, and that means choosing regular breaks. To know that, that's why some people say, not some people, in the book, The Powerful Engagement, which I recommended during the program on productivity, it talks about that it's not about time management, but energy management. To know when it's time to have a break, to know when it's a time to take a nap. And it always makes a big difference during the day, especially when you're working. The other strategy is, of course, minimized multitasking. You choose and say, you know what, I'm going to minimize multitasking as much as possible. I'm going to pay attention to singular tasking or singular tasks, so to speak. So the key thing is, and notice I'm not saying totally eliminate. There are those moments when you cannot avoid multitasking, so to speak. There are those exceptions. Therefore, that's why I'm saying minimize multitasking. If it is something you can avoid, for goodness sake, stay away. Next is prioritization, of course, knowing why those priorities are important, what they mean to you, and choosing to stick to them. But first of all, it begins by you stating what they are and knowing what they are and knowing what they mean to you. So when you attach meaning to something, then it will drive you towards higher performance, towards higher focus. Then you're like, okay, this thing is important to me, I better focus. So you focus on it. But it starts by you defining what that is exactly. And deciding that I shall stick to this, I shall follow through. Sorry about that. Distractor awareness and elimination. This we talked about in the previous program, but important to emphasize again, because what distracts you and how can you eliminate it? What's your strategy to eliminate that? There are people you find who, again, it's not to judge, but just to let you know that it affects your productivity. You have a screen, a TV screen in your reading room, I mean in the living room, then you have another screen in your bedroom. That might, you're increasing your chances of not enjoying your sleep. Reason being, you will say, okay, let me just check out this other program. And before you know it, 2 hours down the road, 3 hours down the road, you're seated in bed watching. These screens have emissions, whatever the name is. Those of you who have scientific backgrounds, you can educate me on that. But I know they have these emissions, so it does not make the environment comfortable, and therefore you will not have comfortable sleep. You might have less hours of sleep, and even with those less hours, it will not be very comfortable sleep. So it's just to figure out what could be those distractions, and then you eliminate them. And then next, and finally, it is to ask yourself, what's the enabling environment? I'll give you an example. There's a gentleman who is one of the most productive authors ever. I forget his name, but if I remember it as we speak, I will talk about him. But I remember the story, at least the illustration. So the way he works is when he's going to write, he just goes to one room, and the room doesn't, if I'm not mistaken, I believe either it doesn't even have a window or something, and there's no internet connection. He doesn't go with his phone or anything, just him and his laptop to type. That's it. He goes in, does his work, then he's out. It's not at home, it's away from home. So meaning he created an enabling environment for super focus, high level productivity. Now that's to the extreme, of course, and no wonder he's super productive, but that's what it takes sometimes. Sometimes you may require those drastic decisions to realize or get what you want. Say, okay, what do I need to create in my environment that will help me to not to be distracted, but rather to be hyper focused. So for me, I noticed that if I open this reading room, I know that my daughters will come, hi, daddy, come, have you seen this? Have you seen that? Of course, I love them. But then there are moments when you have to lock the door and finish the work. Then it will be more enabling. If it's something that doesn't require so much focus, sometimes I leave the door open and, going through something, and they come, I touch them for a few minutes and off they go. And sometimes they tell me, Daddy, do not close the door, because they want to know that anytime they can jump in. And if it's something just doing something light on the laptop, I can leave it that way. But if it's something that requires super focus, I know that it's not going to be an enabling environment by me leaving the reading room door open. So it's you to figure out what would work for you. Enabling environment might mean, for example, if you're a parent and you know that it is extremely difficult for you, even if you kept your door open, closed, they will knock till cows go home, depending on their age bracket. It might mean waking up earlier, 2 hours earlier, 1 hour earlier when they are still asleep. There are some parents who work when the children have gone to bed. So it's really for you to figure out what would enable you the most to produce, okay, or to be focused or to have less distraction. Because remember, we are cutting, the goal is to minimize distractions or to get away from a scattered focus, because now children, this, that, to being hyper-focused. So that's the goal, that's the outcome. Okay. Yeah, Sylvia is asking, what do we mean? What do I mean by energy management? Energy management is really you paying attention to your general well-being and feeling. And what I mean by that is, for example, I put there regular breaks. There are moments when you're working and you notice or sense that you've reached your peak, like you can't go any further. So then you go on the side, not go on the side, you take a walk or something to energize yourself, to make sure that all is well. Energy management might also mean you sense, for example, during one of the sessions, all of a sudden I became hungry. So during the breaks, I had to run to the kitchen to make sure that I get my porridge. That's energy management. Earlier in the day, I took a nap because I felt I needed it. I wasn't feeling at my best, and I felt that a nap would be useful. So you taking a nap, as an example, when you're tired while working, is not wastage of time. No, that is energy management. So that when you come back, you're super duper productive and fresh. So that's what I mean. Please confirm if this makes sense. Let's see. Now, under the skill set segment, let's talk about the 7 steps to full focus. Number 1, sleep. Have enough of it. Please, 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 please. That's an area I've struggled with for many, many years. At least I've reached a level where now, at least I sleep before midnight. My goal is to make sure that by 11 I'm in bed. So I'm dancing usually between 11:30 and 11:50, like I force myself. But my goal is that by 11 I'm in bed. And I always tell that there's a difference. Last night, to be honest, I slept just right on the dot of midnight. Even though my goal was to be there earlier, I found myself distracting myself. I was listening to something on the phone. So please, sleep is crucial. Now, I used to have this mentality that I'm a night owl, and I believe that can change also. Any habit can be changed. So when I got married, I mean, my wife could not withstand that. I had certain duties and obligations to fulfill, which a night owl may not fulfill. So I had to force myself to be better. It's like my creativity would kick in like at midnight, like between midnight and 4, ooh, my head would be buzzing. So that's how I used to live when I was single, and I struggled to curb that one out as I got married. Step 2 is you identify the distractors, rank them in terms of necessity, eliminate all the unnecessary. So meaning there are those distractions which you may not necessarily cut out. I mean, children knocking on your door, those you cannot, unless you become a tyrant at home and they know that once daddy or mommy steps out, chiboko, if you knock on her door or something, that you can't. There are those you may not necessarily eliminate totally, but there are some which you can, like say the phones and when to check email and all that, those you can manage. So rank them and eliminate all the unnecessary. Also, you need to establish your need for motivation. Why must you focus on a given task? Okay, and talking about that, I remember seeing a comment from one of us actually a little earlier, and which I felt would really be perfect for this particular engagement. The Magdalene earlier said, I also think that we need a mindset and desire to achieve more, without which we may not be able to deploy the strategies discussed. And I believe the desire to achieve more, okay? The desire to achieve more, now that's your why. That should be one of your whys. So what you are alluding to, Magdalene, is around you finding the reasons why you should do something. And that's one of the key steps. Why must you focus on this? Why must you eliminate distractions? So that motivation has to be super clear. And part of that, of course, is achieving more and saving energy and all this, and setting good habits for you, for yourself, and also setting good example for other people, for people around you. So as much as possible, come up with as many reasons as possible. And that's why in all the topics under the clarity, I always talk about the why. Why is this subject important? In the same way, for you to be motivated, you need to ask yourself, why is this thing important? The other key is clear your observable environment. Manage your desk. Turn off email if you can. Keep the phones away. I find that if something is extremely, even though I keep my phone in silence, sometimes if something is extremely, I even put my phone in the bedroom, because then I might get tempted to check something, who has called. And then before you know it, I might feel pulled towards making that phone call. And then off I go to a totally different tangent. So you need to clear your desk. There is a time and where my desk was too cluttered. Now I have some things on the desk there in the corner. I feel like I should totally clear them out also, still, either way, because I find that when my desk is 100% clear, then the mind is clear. What's in your view affects your mind. Just remember that. This next technique I shared some time back, and that is the 50-10, 60-30, or in this case, you work for 50 minutes, then rest for 10 minutes, then work for another 50 minutes, rest for 10, which makes it another batch of 60, then you can rest for another 30 minutes. Now, resting might mean, like for me, those breaks usually mean me checking out the latest soccer news about Arsenal. So for me, or taking a walk, those are some of the things I do to switch off, or play with my girls, tickle them for a few minutes, and that's what I do. Okay. All right, someone is asking for the live transcription. Then the other key is you listen to the right music if you can. So for me, I listen to harp music, H-A-R-P. I really find it has a good vibe. It also has spiritual connotations. So that's something I would encourage you to also explore. Which music works for you? Now, my wife, any kind of music would work for her. She has much bigger taste than I do. So again, for me, I listen to harp music. It may not work for you, then don't use it. Use the music that really gets you into a highly focused zone. Then you'll find yourself being super productive. Next. Keep yourself accountable. You have goals to achieve. Make yourself accountable to your manager or supervisor, or find a colleague who can keep you accountable to remind you of the things you promised yourself to do or to deliver or to achieve. Then that becomes super, super valuable to you in the end, because we are all humans. Sometimes we forget certain things, and you need someone who can remind you of what to do or not to do. And that will keep you away from all these distractions and from having a scattered focus to having a focus that is super, super productive. Now let's talk about the ABCDE model of focus. Number one is the A stands for attention, meaning you have to be aware. You have to really pay attention in terms of what you're meant to do or not to do. In this case, you want to be aware of what's going on inside you and around you. That's what really attention is. Are you usually at your best in the morning, as an example, or in the afternoon or at night? That's awareness. That's paying attention. Are your distractions usually from your children or your phone? That's paying attention. So that it starts from you paying attention. The second letter, which is B, is breaks. Remember, breaks are important. There's always the law of diminishing returns. When you reach the law of diminishing returns, which is usually between 50 to 90 minutes, usually it's advisable max 90 minutes, get a break. Next is the C, stands for concentration. You just need to choose and say, I'm going to concentrate on this task, no matter what. Okay. And that's a skill that you and I can build. You say, you know what, I'm going to concentrate. And if you can't do 50 minutes, you can do in chunks. You say, you know what, this week I'm going to concentrate on a task, no distractions, work non-stop for 15 minutes. Next week, 20 minutes. The other week, 30 minutes. Before you know it, you can do a full hour. The D is distractor elimination. So just reminding yourself, say, you know what, whichever distraction it is, I need to eliminate it or minimize it. Okay. And the E is environment management. So this is a model which can help you remember around the notion of focus. So you know what, today I have to do A to E to make sure that I focus, or I eliminate all these distractions to focus fully, right? With the mastery, my challenge to you is in the next 24 hours, pick a task to focus on using the ABCD model of focus. That's what it is, period. You do that. And so you remind yourself of ABCDE when you're going to do a focus. Let me pay attention. Which breaks will I have? I'm choosing to concentrate. Which distractions do I need to remove? Is my environment right? Boom, you deploy it, and then you get rocking and rolling. So that's what you're going to do for the next 24 hours. That's your task. And that is, what did you find most useful in this presentation? And how are you going to implement the lessons moving forward in your life and career stroke business? So that's something I would encourage you to reflect upon. So there's someone who sent me a private message asking, so what do you call this guy who gets his focus after sex? Well, I'm not a sex psychologist, but again, we are wired differently. There are those who lose energy after sex. There are those who are energized after sex. So we are different people. I don't know what those people are called, but if it works for you, fantastic. If you have a partner, of course. Then someone asked, in situations of emotional breakdown and stress, e.g. after losing someone, is focus still in your control? In your control? Please clarify. Godfrey is the one who asked. Well, again, all these things I teach, they're about context. So when you say you're losing someone, it's how close are they? And there are moments whereby, I mean, you need time to grieve and not to be thinking about focus and all that. And the only addition I would make is, even amidst challenging moments, there are things that you really need to focus on. For example, I've had those moments definitely in my life where now I know my focus is to sort out whatever is before me, or in this case, it might mean comforting someone else or comforting myself or myself healing. That could be what you need to focus on. You healing as an example, or grieving, or getting help or helping someone. So in whichever moment, there are those things that you need to do to make sure that you focus. Of course, it cannot be as controllable. I can say in those situations, you mainly influence it more than controlling it. Adnan asked, what if my business requires responding to calls and WhatsApp? Well, calls and WhatsApp, those are your productive channels. So then dealing with calls and WhatsApp in your context is not a distraction. It is a business engagement. Having said that, of course, even though your business requires you to respond to calls and WhatsApp, I'm 100% certain that not all calls are business, not all WhatsApp messages are business related. So then you have to be intelligent, you have to be picky, so to speak, what to focus on and what not to focus on in those contexts. Godfrey and Adnan, let me know if I've answered your questions. Godfrey is asking, do we have a relationship between high focus ability at a younger age and less focus ability as you attain a higher age? Just curious to find out. I would say it's just relative. What do I mean by relative? You might find, for example, that if someone is younger, their brain is sharper, so to speak. And as they age, their brain might go off the cliff, so to speak. That's one aspect. Having said that, research shows that if you take great care of your brain, you can keep, it's a muscle which you can practice, meaning there are people whereby even as they grow older, they become even more focused because then they have learned, train, and focus their urges not to be distracted, and therefore they have very high levels of focus stability. Ability to focus, I beg your pardon. So it's really two factors. Number one, how far has someone built their capacity to focus? And number two, the health of their brain. Because if your brain is healthy, then focusing makes it much, much easier. And of course, then you building that muscle, that skill, that ability to focus. So I wouldn't say as you get older or younger, it is relative. How have you taken care of yourself or less care? It's going to affect the health of your brain. And of course, how much have you conditioned yourself to focus? I'll give you an example. I understand when Tiger Woods was being trained by the parents, the father, before he passed on, when he was young, you recall, it could have been at the age of 2 or 3, he would hold the golf club and the dad would be banging something to make noise to see, hey, can you still focus? Amidst all the noise, because he knew time would come when Tiger Woods would be on the golf course where there's so much noise. But so he was being trained by the father to make sure that he focuses regardless of the noise. So as you can imagine, a person like that, like Tiger Woods, no wonder he achieved what he achieved or has achieved what he has achieved. He was trained. So it's a muscle. Focus is a muscle. He was trained to focus from a very young age under extreme conditions to make sure that it's a very strong muscle. All right. So let me know. Yeah, Godfrey, let me know if I've answered your question or if it